KwaZulu-Natal authorities have estimated the damage that the floods have caused to be at several billion rand and reported sporadic looting in Durban. The floods have disrupted operations at Africa's busiest ports in the city, which is still recovering from catastrophic rioting and looting in July last year. Some truck drivers say for days they have been unable to transport cargo to and from the Port of Durban. The temporary closure of the port earlier this week has caused a backlog of trucks, largely at the Bayhead container terminal. Now let's discuss this. We are joined via Zoom by Gavin Kelly, Chief Executive Officer at Road Freight Association. Gavin, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Has there already been a shortage in foodstuff, especially in KZN, given this devastation?
Hi, good afternoon, and good afternoon to all your viewers. And hopefully those of you who aren't down in KZN dealing with these horrible and devastating floods, you're having a peaceful Easter period. No, there haven't been food shortages at this stage or fuel shortages. What is the challenge, though, is getting those goods out of the harbour. Obviously, there are roads that are no longer possible. We're using the Bluff Road, and thank you very much to the citizens and the eThekwini Metro for allowing us to use that and putting a number of trucks through there. So we're trying to make sure that we're getting the essentials out of that harbour, and that's really fuel, food in and out, perishables, and then obviously medicines. But at this stage, we don't have shortages. But as always in South Africa, what happens is as soon as our public think there's going to be a shortage, they start to buy and they start to empty stores and fuel stations faster than we can supply them. Until about this morning, about 8 o'clock, we were only about to get 20% of what we normally do in terms of fuel out of the harbour. We've got that up to 60% to make sure that shortages don't happen. But at this stage, there aren't shortages due to the flood. There are supply challenges.
And that's very good to hear, because I was going to ask you about the impact, of those shortages in terms of fuel are concerned. But it's good to know that that is not the case at the moment. But, in our intro, we talked about this particular incident we are calling obviously a devastation, happening just 6 months or so after the unrest in Durban. Talk to us about what this latest is having in terms of impact on the trucking industry.
Well, obviously we haven't repaired or replaced all of the damaged warehouses or distribution centres that really were badly destroyed during the July unrest. There's still a fair amount of repair being done. So that has caught us a bit, because where we normally would have had quite a number of areas with high stock ready to be shipped out or to be brought back into the greater Durban area, we have to go a little bit further afield. So we're going up further into Northern Natal, KZN, and we're going into the Free State to bring some fuel back as well that normally would have gone north into the country. So that really has placed a large amount of pressure on our supply routes back into KZN. The biggest problem really isn't that we don't have the stock. We have it. We have the fuel, we have the food. The problem is that there are roads and access points that have been cut off. So in a number of areas, we have to go a roundabout way. So there's time delay, and it's really trying to get that food back to the retail sites, or into the retail sites, and the fuel into the retail sites, that is requiring a little bit more of thought, a little bit more of planning, and starting to move stuff a lot quicker. But I can assure the public that we've got the stocks. We're just struggling to get it through those routes that have been destroyed. And of course, that's something that's going to take some time to repair, because some roads have really been badly damaged.
I mean, just at the beginning of the floods, we saw that truck drivers also battled as were normal vehicles. One would assume that in conditions like that, they would be able to maneuver their way. But because the main national roads in KZN were also affected, we saw, trucks being, lodged underground in some instances. One truck driver was trying to explain how they were in convoy, but his truck unfortunately managed to be sucked underground, and he was visibly shaken and traumatized. How are some of those businesses managing to pick up the pieces?
I think a lot of people don't understand the power of water. You know, we bathe in it and we drink it, and now and then we swim and we go down to the sea and we'll swim in a couple of waves. But when water comes in force and it is channeled, so for example, we have these huge rains and that goes into culverts or goes into rivers, and that force of water comes down over a very limited space of time. And you hear figures of 500 or 1,000 millimeters of rain haven't fallen across an area, which then gathers and goes down these roads. So what happens is, or these rivers, so what happens is that water starts to undercut. And that's really the problem. And why we haven't been able to use a lot of the routes is because we don't really know what the damage is. We can't see what's underneath the road, for example, unless the road has started to subside or you see holes appearing. So that's the problem. And now you drive along with a truck or even a car and the road collapses under you because there's this gaping hole. And you can imagine, you're in this vehicle that weighs a good, depending on the size of vehicle, could weigh up to 56 tons. That's a lot of weight. You'll go down literally like a lead balloon. It's very, very heavy. And suddenly you're swamped with water. That must be an absolutely terrifying experience. So we have areas where the trucks just cannot go because they'd get stuck. They're not 4x4 vehicles. They weigh a lot. They've got a number of wheels that can get caught up in the mud and get sucked into the mud. That's the nature of physics. So there are areas, and you've seen pictures, I'm sure, of the water up to the doors of trucks. So there was a lot of water, and there are a lot of unsafe places. And at this stage, we are concerned about the lives and well-beings of our drivers. Obviously, we want to get the goods to the general public as quickly as we can, but we need to be careful.
Gavin, does this latest flood, I mean, we've seen several, 2017, 2019, and now this latest one, does it in somehow make you as an association think about perhaps changing your operating model, your business model? What does this signify for you as you go about your business?
Well, we're not going to go buy boats. It's happened a couple of times before, and it's happened in the 70s and the 80s, and it's now happened again. So there are a couple of things that we need to learn from what's happened and we need to plan for. So, for example, I think the first lesson that we've all learned, and it isn't only the freight companies, it's the harbour as well, it's Transnet port terminals, everyone involved around the harbour area and the businesses that they do, is that it's shown us very clearly that if Bay Road is taken out, which is what has happened, we have no alternative. The old alternative now meanders through a fair amount of residential property. And of course, you don't want heavy vehicle traffic moving through those sorts of areas. So we need to find alternatives. That's the first thing we need to do. And we need to make sure that if one route is taken out by whatever natural disaster, and in this case it's heavy flooding, that the second route wouldn't be as susceptible to that or could withstand it a lot more. The second thing we need to do, and I know it's currently happening, is that Bay Road needs to be reinforced, improved in terms of this sort of a disaster, so that next time round it could withstand this far better. Then we need to come up with a plan or put in place areas where we can safely hold the trucks overnight. So you'll recall 2 or 3 days ago when these first floods hit KZN, we stopped the trucks up at Marion Hill and there was already about a 10-kilometer queue there. And we needed to hold those vehicles in safe places, especially overnight, so they weren't targeted by opportunistic criminal elements. And unfortunately, everybody sees an opportunity. Some opportunities are good, like those people we've just spoken to wanting to take stuff down to KZN. And then, of course, criminals see an opportunity. So we need to come up with places we can safely hold the vehicles. And then finally, I think we need to put up some disaster stores. And you would change the contents of those stores monthly or every 6 months, so that when something like this happens, you've got the basic important necessities right there at your doorstep that you could then use with a specialized lighter fleet, for example, that could get to the various areas that are experiencing challenges and problems and get to people.
Gavin Kelly, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Stay safe, and everyone out there, please stay safe. It's still going to rain. We want you with us. Thank you.
Same to you. Thank you. Gavin Kelly, Chief Executive Officer at the Road Freight Association.